You could take one look at tonight's stat sheet and box score between Tennessee and Duke and make a pretty good guess that it was an exhibition game, and you would be correct because there was plenty of rust for both of these teams to knock off. In fact, Duke's head coach and Jon Scheyer put it pretty perfectly that this was a fact-finding mission. So what did we learn about the Tennessee Volunteers following that 83-76 loss to the Duke Blue Devils? I'm Paige Dower, and this is our first post-game report inside Food City Center with the regular season quite literally knocking on the door, which feels pretty surreal. The first thing that we learned, Vol fans are eager for the basketball season to return. Not only was it a sold-out exhibition game, the crowd noise could rival really any home game from last season. You all were so loud tonight. In fact, the head coach for Duke men's basketball, Jon Scheyer, once again had in his opening presser highlighting, praising, complimenting how effective the crowd noise was tonight, even going further saying, I now understand after my first trip to TBA why this is such a hard place to play because of the fans. Really looking around for much of this game, there were only a handful of seats that were empty and a lot of people on their feet and cheering for much of the night. That certainly was effective for Tennessee's benefit when they were on defense, because between the crowd noise and the physicality that Tennessee played with, they absolutely had Duke on their heels in the first half. They held them to 35% in the paint or from the field in the first half. And then from the layup attempts, even better, 7 of 23 on Duke's layup attempts. Great defense by Tennessee, and a lot of that had to come from Felix Okpara, who I would say has made the biggest jump from last season's team. And I know you could count on one hand, probably just use a couple of those fingers to name the returning players from last year's roster. But of those guys who did return, Felix Okpara is making tremendous growth. He's a vocal leader on this team, and there's just so much more fluidity within the offense as well when he's out on the court. So having somebody like him is huge, because what Rick Barnes wants, and I think what our eyes would tell us from tonight's game, is that Tennessee needs more physicality, right? They were able to affect Duke in the first half. We're not able to sustain that in the second half. The second thing that I noticed, or I guess the third thing that I noticed, the team played way too fast at times. I know this team wants to be a bit more up-tempo, right? Be that Josh Heupel, Kim Caldwell kind of style. At times, they sped themselves up and they weren't able to see the field quite clearly enough. They weren't able to get off their first read, let's say, and there was a lot of times where it felt like they were pressing, especially from Jacoby Gillespie and Nate Met's perspective, just how much they were trying to force plays and shots to happen versus kind of dishing it to their teammates to open up other avenues. We could specifically see that in Tennessee's field goal effort. Outside of Jacoby and Nate Met, all of the other guys were really pretty effective. Felix Okpara is 5 of 6. Dwayne Brown, he was, I think, 5 of 5 as well. Everyone else was very effective in their limited opportunities. And I say limited because Jacoby Gillespie was 5 of 21. Nate Met was 5 of 19. What Rick Barnes' main message to them after the game was they have to rely on their teammates. They need to stop forcing and pressing so much, because there are other guys that could come out there and bring support like Felix Okpara did. And I think a lot of that too will come when this team builds chemistry. That's the other thing that I noticed in this team, right? We mentioned that there are only a couple of guys from last year's roster. Everybody else is brand new, whether by way of the transfer portal or being a true freshman like Nate Met. So what we saw a lot in this game was a ton of different lineups and rotations. And Rick Barnes says, I'm really just out there trying to figure out what works best. And I think what worked best was especially when we saw guys like Felix Okpara out on the court. I think JP Estrella has done well with his limited time to get conditioned for this season. And Cade Phillips has kind of been in and out of injury and limitations as well this season. So again, a fact-finding mission. There's a lot to learn from this team. The main thing that Rick Barnes really wants to see, and I think all of us could agree, is certainly more physicality. They need to be fast but controlled on offense, and they cannot let their offense dictate the defense. They've got to be able to go there, bring support, win the battle on the glass. Too many times was Duke able to go up and get the offensive rebound when it was right in the grasp of Tennessee. So a number of great things, right? They are holding firm against the preseason and the AP poll to number 6 Duke. Tennessee is a few spots behind. I believe they're number 18 in the AP poll, and they hung tough. It really was, even in that last minute, right? We mentioned the physicality that Rick Barnes wants to see. When they had the physicality, game-changing types of plays. We saw that in the final couple of minutes in the game, and it's Cade Phillips and Jacoby Gillespie. Gillespie forces the turnover. Cade Phillips dishes it back to Jacoby on the fast break. He gets a dunk, and it's a one-possession game. It's 77-74, but unable to kind of get home in those final minutes, and that's why the final score is what it looks like. But again, fact-finding mission. They learned a lot about themselves. This was probably the most physical game for a number of those guys, like Nate Ahmet, that they've ever been in their life. So a lot of positive things to take away from this game, especially when you get ready to have, I think, their first games on November 3rd. So really very quickly will they be here. Might even be before that. But again, a lot to take away from this game. They just need better defense at times, more physicality, and to be more in control on offense. But we'll have so much more tomorrow. Josh Elander is having his official introductory press conference. Josh Heupel getting ready for an emotional game potentially with Oklahoma here at home, and much more on Tennessee basketball. We have Ethan Berg feature with him on Wednesday at 11. So certainly make sure you have your notifications on so you don't miss that. And I'll talk to you guys